Hello friends, welcome to the Indian Express Explain class. My name is Bhuvan Jha. As I welcome each one of you, those who are joining me right now and those who will be watching this class later. Okay, Chetana, good evening. Your neighbor, why the timing these days? Okay, so we are planning something special for the students, and for that I require my mornings free. Okay, which is why this has been shifted for the evening slot, but we will figure out a convenient time going forward. Okay, Coder, Bulbul, Karuna, good evening. Akashdeep. Oh, welcome Akashdeep. Okay, I'll see you at 6 p.m. Nice. बढ़िया मिलते हैं उस समय 6 p.m. पे Akashdeep. Okay, let's get forward. So, three topics that I have for you. Number one, COP28 final outcomes. So we have not yet gone ahead and say discussed in detail about COP28. So today is a very good day to go ahead and discuss the entirety of COP28, more specifically the outcomes. Okay, and so when you are studying for the examination, what I suggest is go ahead and keep the outcomes of COP27 versus COP28 side by side, so that you are able to chart out which way are the policy makers thinking. Okay, don't just know 28 or 27 in isolation. Try to see how it is a continuation of the conversation that has been going on. Okay, next we will take a look at Aloda Fault. Okay, a concept from geography, and more importantly you'll realize this has been attributed for the major earthquakes that has been observed in Himalayas in recent times. Okay, so we'll learn about Aloda Fault. More importantly, we'll go ahead a step further and we'll learn about the differences between say fault and thrust. Okay, and then I have obviously a lot of questions for you, so let's get started. Chalo. So before we begin to discuss COP28, my friends, the first thing that you ought to know of is the global stocktake. Now what does exactly this mean, stocktake? Forget what I have written so far. What is stock taking? So for example, if you started your preparation say in August 2023 is when you started your preparation, and you're supposed to appear for your examination in say May 2024. And currently we are here in December. So right now, if you indulge in stock taking, if you take a stock take of your preparation, you are essentially looking at how much of the syllabus you have completed. Okay, what is the amount of the syllabus that is still left? Have you gone and say done question solving? Have you covered your optionals? All of that, review that of the progress that has been made so far and what is left to be done. That is essentially stock taking. Okay, so now go ahead and extrapolate this very concept in the realm of climate change. So you know that stock taking essentially is to do with the goals that were set forth during the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015. Okay, so this is what it is about. You're looking at everything related to where the world stands on climate action and support. Then you are seeing, okay, what are the gaps that we still have to go ahead and fulfill. Okay, and we have to work together to chart a better course. So this is the entire method of stock taking in the context of Paris climate goals. Right. Now what you find is this was done for the very first time. Okay, it's key here. This was the first time this was done at COP28 that just concluded. Okay, and here onwards you will have stock taking, which means this review of the progress that has been made so far. That will be done every 5 years henceforth. So the next stock taking is going to be in 2028. Right? Okay, it's mandated by the Paris Climate Agreement. So this is what global stock take is. Chetana, good to know. Sandhya, good evening. Just a second, let me just make aapka chat sahi aa jaye. Good, okay. So now that you have understood global stock take, now let's go ahead and understand our outcomes one by one. Now it will start to make sense. Okay. So outcome number one, transitioning away from fossil fuels. Please note the language. Why? Because herein lies a very good MCQ. Alright. And the MCQ is going to be for you to identify the difference between transitioning away versus phasing out versus phasing down. Okay. Closely linked terms, but vastly different from each other. Okay. So first, transitioning away from fossil fuels has been agreed at COP28. Okay. It is the first COP text ever that openly calls on countries to transition away from fossil fuels. Now, what does transitioning mean? What does phasing out mean? What does phasing down mean? Let's understand it one by one. Okay, phasing out is putting a complete stop. Here is the key difference, guys. So when you're looking at phasing out, it is stopping. All right. Phasing down is essentially going ahead and reducing the consumption rate. Okay. This is it. Phasing down means cutting down on fossil fuel without setting targets. Now, what were all the countries looking to do at COP28? In fact, you will find that the pre-final draft of the agreement that was prepared and circulated, okay, 100 out of 200 members, roughly, most of them wanted to go ahead and use the term phasing out. Okay, but then you found that the final agreement did not even use the term phasing down, but instead uses a new term called transitioning away. This is essentially, you have gone ahead and diluted the document. What does this mean? That something that could have been binding, achievable, that you could have measured through targets, right? That has been done away with. Now you are just looking at, say, a commitment that is long term. Nothing of gain will be obtained out of the outcome number one in the short term. Please understand this, okay? The final agreement calls upon the countries to transition away from fossil fuels so as to achieve net zero by 2050. Here it is. You have set a long-term target. Nothing that will address the problem of climate change in the short term. Okay, one of the key criticisms, in fact, of this entire transitioning away from fossil fuels. However, very important. Why? It's the first time ever that you have had the conference of parties go ahead and acknowledge that yes, we need to go ahead and say shun fossil fuels altogether, right? Next, look at this now. So when you're looking at the 2050 goal, my friends, transitioning away from fossil fuels by 2050. So here is what you're looking at is the global, say, mismatch. Okay, worldwide you have a look now. If you look at it, oil, natural gas and coal are almost the majority in across continents, which means you are going to require a lot of money. A lot of money will be required for countries to go ahead, firstly transition from fossil fuel and head towards renewables. Can you agree this? Can you agree with me here? That those systems, those industries, those particular companies, sectors that are all, say, fossil fuel heavy, that use fossil fuel a lot, right? Now they are going to require a lot of investment to build new infrastructure that will probably be going to go ahead and harness the energy from renewables. So the question so arises, who will give the money in? Okay, for this transitioning to happen, what is the financing mechanism? Because eventually what you're looking out is for a long-term goal. 2050 goal is what you have set forth. Okay, so this is one area I want you to know. Why? Because this concept becomes key importance in the coming slides. So just make sure that you know that financing for climate change, okay, financing in the context of climate change is a major issue. You will realize many concepts are related to this. Say, for example, loss and damage concept that we discuss. Okay, it's directly related to, say, the financing mechanism that was put forth first in Warsaw 2013. Okay, so we'll go ahead and discuss. Don't get flustered, but stay with me for the time being. Right, now looking at the second outcome, the tripling of the renewable energy. Okay, this is what number 2 is. Let's look at it. More than 100 countries have endorsed tripling reliance on renewables. Okay, so you are going to move away from fossil fuels and you are going to go towards renewables. And this is going to be your current capacity. You're going to go at least 3 times. But then the problem is, these goals are considered difficult. Why? You just realized right now, financial pressures on developing nations. Eventually, who gives the money? This is very important. Plus, you also are aware that currently you have rising interest rates in advanced economies, which makes debt and debt servicing that much more expensive. So what happens eventually? What is the point of this particular line, guys? Have a look. Rising interest rates in advanced economies mean that the high level of debt developing countries are becoming much more, say, the debt to service is becoming much more high. You're having to pay that much more, right? So for example, have a look at this slide. So that will give you the, say, impact of the issue. Okay. These are the groups of nations in Africa. And what you find is that they spend more on debt servicing than they are spending on health. Imagine this, that on debt servicing, your net expenditure is more so, in fact, much higher than your health. This is the case of, say, your sub-Saharan Africa. Now, what happens when you are bringing in climate change into this picture? When you have climate change that also starts to go ahead and affect these very countries, which it already has started, okay? So for them to go ahead and invest in renewables to move away from fossil fuels, they already do not have the money to invest in their own people. Health, education, social sector has taken a backseat because most of the money is going for debt reservicing. So will they have money to spare for, say, this particular transition, this particular goal that has been set forth? Which is why you find that experts are saying that the goals are very, very difficult. They are almost, say, just, in Hindi you say, Hawai Khila. There has got no fundamental basis to it right now. It's just existing on paper so far, right? You also find currently that 70 nations are in debt distress. What does debt distress mean? That you have probably defaulted on a loan, or your current situation is such that you are going to default on a loan in the coming days, right? So you find around 70 countries. You're looking at Ukraine, that's a part of that list, Pakistan, Ethiopia, most of sub-Saharan Africa. All of those countries are a part of that list, primarily from the global south. So please understand, in the current financial climate, it is extremely difficult for these group of nations to go ahead and maintain that sort of financial leverage or have financial backing to invest in what the COP28 outcome is. Okay, one of the primary criticisms once again. Okay, another huge criticism which I have obviously figured out after going through multiple articles is that this whole tripling that you read, tripling of renewable energy. Now this looks very good to read, no? But what you find is that this is a global target. Once again, no proper benchmarks are being set, no proper targets are being set at the national level. So now, the more broad your targets are, the less likely how you can enforce them in a correct manner, right? Specificity is missing here. Look at it. Tripling is a global target, and it is not known how every country will eventually triple their current installed capacity. Thus, no accountability once again. Because eventually, who applies and who enforces global accountability? Eventually, it is all to do with sovereignty of individual nations. Correct. So this is outcome number 2. Outcome number 3. Right? Let's go forward. Loss and damage fund approved. Now this we have read in detail in the past classes. Loss and damage that came in Warsaw in the year 2013. Okay. And you found that at COP27, that was in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, you had the loss and damage that was agreed to. And then they go ahead and form a transitional committee. Okay. So this committee was to go ahead and form consensus, because eventually for loss and damage, it will require money. And so they wanted to figure out who will pay the money. Okay. Now you found that, say, United Nations said, well, we do not need any other kind of instrument other than what probably already exists. Okay. At the same time, developing nations also wanted to go ahead and have verifiable commitments, because eventually the loss and damage fund is a lot to do with climate justice. It is to do with acknowledging the historical emissions that a country has gone ahead and, say, put forth. Okay. So this is probably the only good news coming out of all of this, but that also you will realize only exists on paper only so far. Okay. So approval of climate disaster loss and damage fund, which was first table in Sharm el-Sheikh, that has happened. Okay. Which means vulnerable communities and developing nations can expect some sort of financial support to cope with disasters. Okay. Now, apart from gathering pledges, so you have had countries that have committed money. Now that money commitment has also not been uniform. Not everyone has, say, come forth with the same amount of money. So for example, you find that Qatar and Germany, they have gone ahead and committed 100 million. But then major economies like, say, United States, just 17.5 million. China, even less, 10 million. So you see the lack of sincerity is outrightly visible. you still have countries that do not want to acknowledge their role in historical emissions that has been so far. Okay. So aside from gathering pledges, they also discussed how to operate the fund. Right. So you have got a pool of roughly 800 million that has been raised. Total cumulative, if you find, 800 million US dollars has been pledged by all the nations cumulatively. Now the problem arises, the problem of say distribution of this money. So for that they need to come to an agreement again. You see how many checkpoints you have to reach and cross before eventually this sort of transnational global framework starts to function. Okay. So the money raising has been done. Now the money distribution. So for that they are going to have a meeting in January. Okay. And well, they will finalize the framework. So still only exists on paper, guys, all of this. Even this money that has been committed, well, it is not going to reach the intended people, the beneficiaries, anytime soon. Right? So this is loss and damage fund approved, outcome number 3. And then you're looking at phasing down of coal. Now first, the one question that should immediately come to your mind. So you had a particular slide, a particular outcome, wherein I mentioned, say, fossil fuels. So why is coal being mentioned separately? Okay. What you find is that coal has received special mention in this agreement, and this has been a continuation of the Glasgow conference, where coal was identified as one of the primary sources of pollution of emissions. Okay. So you have burning of coal and you have various amounts of oxides and sulfides and everything that comes out. Okay. So coal has been singled out since Glasgow conference in 2021. Okay. Now, what was agreed to this time? So there was a move to stipulate that no new coal-fired power plants could be opened unless you had carbon storage and capture facility. Okay. So you could open, but if you could only if you could go ahead and capture whatever was the emissions that was coming out of it. The carbon needed to be captured and sequestered. Right. So this was the condition that was being put forth. You had India and China that resisted this. Why? Because eventually we have a responsibility towards the burgeoning population. And unless adequate infrastructure in renewables is ensured, India needs to go ahead and fulfill that demand through fossil fuels. For that, you are going to have to build coal power plants, right? Thermal power plants. So how could you make that commitment therein? So this was India's assertion, similar as China's. And thus you find that phasing down the unabated use of coal has been agreed to. Okay, not phasing out, but phasing down, which means eventually you are looking at reducing. Just reduction is necessary. Okay, complete stoppage, no. Phasing down the unabated use of coal. Okay, as long as the carbon dioxide that the coal so generates, it should be stored underground. Carbon capture should be ensured. Okay, so this is another key outcome that has come out of COP28. The slides are extremely important. I have collated them from various sources. So if you go ahead and include these materials as part of your notes, it should adequately benefit you and empower you to answer any question efficiently. Okay. Right. And final outcome here that we have, the global goal on adaptation. Now, one common problem that I find between students is that they fail to differentiate between adaptation and mitigation. Okay. So before we understand what's the global goal on adaptation, let's understand the difference between adaptation and mitigation first. Okay. Adaptation is nothing but all those strategies and measures which will minimize the adverse impacts. Okay. That is all. Simply put, it will minimize the adverse impacts of climate change. The effects of climate change can be negated through, adaptation efforts. Okay. For example, you're looking at infrastructure resilience, right? So in Netherlands, they have gone ahead and built a lot of sea dikes. Dikes have been built so as to reduce erosion. Okay. Changes in agricultural practices, say for example, drip irrigation. Right. This is an adaptation measure that you can take for those areas that are facing, say, drought or less than adequate rainfall. Whereas mitigation is hitting the very source, the cause. Okay. If you want to understand it in a simpler manner, adaptation takes care of the effect, whereas mitigation takes care of the cause. Right? So you're looking at hitting the very source, the reducing the or preventing the emission of greenhouse gases. Right? So example, transitioning to renewables, afforestation programs, all those that will reduce the intensity of the GHGs, right? So that's adaptation, that's mitigation. Now, up until now, COP27 outcome document, if you have a look at it, you will find that adaptation is nowhere mentioned. The entire focus is on mitigation. You see, the entire focus is on hitting or say reducing the intensity, the impact of the GHGs. But in COP28, for the first time, you find that they have gone ahead and focused on adaptation this time. Okay, so let's look at what the global goal on adaptation is. Right? So now you understand, historically, adaptation hasn't received enough attention. Even COP27, you will find talks about mitigation. Okay. Now why is this bias? Why do countries love mitigation but not adaptation? Okay. Because eventually adaptation, the process and the immediate effects are felt locally. So countries think, well, it's not my responsibility. Okay. That nations can go ahead and build adaptation infrastructure or empower their communities locally. I stand to gain nothing out of it. But then what was observed was that developing countries have been arguing that you need a global framework, that you can't leave this for countries to do on an individual basis. X country is doing something else, Y country is doing something else. That is not desired. A global framework, a standard operating procedure is required. Okay. Sudarshan, good evening. How are you? Welcome, welcome. Okay. So the Glasgow conference decided to set up a 2-year work program. And these are the areas where you're looking to go ahead and the common goal of adaptation that has been discussed are these: reduction in climate-induced water scarcity, climate resilience, okay, resilience against climate-induced health impacts. All of that is going to be a part of the global goal on adaptation. Very important, once again, from the mains perspective. It makes for a very good question because eventually the 2-3 things that we have discussed, four slides in fact regarding COP28, okay, you will find many firsts have happened. For example, first time ever COP has gone ahead and said, well, we are going to transition away from fossil fuels. It's a long-term commitment, but it's a commitment nonetheless. Okay. At the same time, you find they have gone ahead and said, well, we are going to phase down on coal. Okay. Once again, signaling that we are going to go ahead and transition towards renewables eventually. But now, once this commitment has been made, the larger issue is who is going to fund the commitment. And then comes, well, it's just going to be a mitigation so far, or are you also going to adapt people? Are you going to empower local communities to come up with indigenous solutions now? Okay, so this is what the whole point is. But even then you will realize that this goal that we're discussing, it is considered to be inefficient right now. Why? Once again, there are no identifiable goals, no targets have been set. It is just a commitment once again. As I have been saying throughout this lecture, once again, it only exists on paper. Eldo, good evening. Welcome. Are you getting the 4-5 key concepts that we have understood of COP28? If you understood them, do consider leaving me a like because these 4-5 slides have been prepared after a lot of hard work, after going through multiple documents, including the source document, which most of it has not been released yet. Okay, only the preliminary document is out. So I've gone ahead and studied them and then eventually prepared this for you. So do consider leaving me a like, and after that, do consider answering these questions for me too, my friends. Okay, Saurashtra and Kutch, Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan. Arrange in descending order of probability of occurrence of drought in India. Essentially, this question asks you to understand and know about our drought-prone areas. Okay. So when you are doing mapping, especially from the geography perspective, like you do for say monsoons, like you go ahead and trace the journey of monsoons, please do consider going ahead and doing the same for drought also. Okay, because it will eventually help you consolidate a lot of information, including say correlate it with the soil type, okay, correlate it with the Koppin's climate classification. All of that is integrating your geography knowledge to make this easy for you. If you have that knowledge clear, no book is going to give you this information. Okay, this information is largely dependent on you knowing your say Koppen climate classification, including say the soil type that is present. Okay, Karuna, thanks, you're very kind. Chetna, you're very kind. Thank you guys. Okay, do answer this question please. And then this is a PYQ. So we always do PYQs whenever we get the opportunity. So this is a PYQ from the year, if I'm not mistaken, 2011. Okay. So answer this too. Consider the following: carbon dioxide, oxides of nitrogen, oxides of sulfur. Which of the above is or are the emission or emissions from coal combustion at thermal power plants? Okay. Let me know the answer to this too. Okay. And go a step further. And if you do want to go ahead and finish this topic, well, when you study coal, do make sure that you know about each and every kind of emissions, the gases, whatever VOCs are coming out, your organic compounds, all of that you should have a fair idea of. And after that, answer this question too. Question number 3. Okay. It is the condition or the conditions determined by various factors or processes which increases the susceptibility of a community to the impact of hazards. Okay. Why have I asked you this question? Sorry. Because eventually, when you realize that COP28 is directly a continuation of, say, what was agreed in Paris Climate Agreement. Okay. And eventually all of this is to do with building resilience insofar as climate related disasters are concerned. Okay. I have not used disasters. Why? Because it is only to do with climate related disasters. So when you are linking this together, you have to realize that disasters and disaster management has to be studied together. Only then can you go ahead and frame the entire linkage from the problem to the solution. Guys, pay attention. This is what you should be doing during your preparation. Okay. When you are studying about COP28, don't just stop at COP28. Okay. Link it to, say, your geography, and then go a step further and then understand how is it related to my disaster management procedures and practices, including building resilience in the system. Okay. So let me know your answers to this. Which is the correct option as per the definition? Okay. Is it vulnerability? Is it risk? Is it disaster impact? Or is it disaster damage? Right? Okay. Let's go forward. So the interview guidance program is, well, our entire team is receiving many DAFs from across the country, and we are very thankful, okay, for all the trust that is being reposed in StudyIQ by the students who have cleared mains. To the rest who are still undecided, okay, go ahead and look at the entire course, and in fact the panel, the entire project that is designed to make sure that you are best prepared for the final day. Okay. And well, obviously being led by Shri Anil Swarup, who is the former secretary to the Government of India. Our entire panel list is going to be out on the website soon. My advice to you, send your DAF to us and get connected with this ASAP, because again, opinion shaping takes time. Okay. It's not something that you can mug up and then say in front of the interview board. That's not so easy. Okay. We have to go ahead and have the right opinion, the correct opinion, get rid of your biases. That fog of bias that might so exist has to be cleared before you walk into the interview hall. Okay. So go ahead and connect with this. Send your DAFs to igp2023@studiiq.com. Okay. Moving on to the next topic that I have for you is to do with Aloda Fault. Have a look at this headline. Have earthquakes really increased in India due to activation of the Aloda Fault? Okay. This is an article that I've picked from Down to Earth. I will be sharing this article on my Telegram channel right after we finish this class. Okay, so you can go ahead and have a look at that article too. So you will find that we have had frequent, say, high intensity earthquakes, 5.8, 6.2, in fact, high magnitude earthquakes, 6.4, right? So this is being postulated by experts that Aloda Fault might have gotten activated. What is the Aloda Fault? What is its distribution? Let's understand it very quickly. So you find that it is a geological fault that runs through western Nepal and then into Uttarakhand. Okay. And then this fault goes ahead and forms two thrusts in Uttarakhand. Don't worry if you don't understand the difference between fault and thrust. I have got that covered for you. Okay. But understand this, that my fault eventually goes ahead and transitions into the south Aloda thrust and the north Aloda thrust. Okay. And more importantly, from the examination perspective, it is the largest active continental mega thrust fault. Big words. It's a very simple thing. Wherever you have convergence and subduction going on, you will have these zones of weaknesses that are formed. Simple. Okay. For example, if you go ahead and look at, say, your Cascadia Fault, okay, you have a Cascadia Fault, which is also considered to be a continental megathrust fault. Okay, this exists between your Juan de Fuca and North American plates in Northern America. So what do you have there? You have convergence going on, subduction happening, zone of weaknesses getting formed, and thus fault creation happens. Now faults can be of many types. Okay, so let's go ahead and understand them one by one. Fault versus thrust. Okay, fault is, as I have told you, it's a zone of weakness. A zone of rock where there has been movement along or one or the both sides. It could be this way, that way, going above each other, going below each other. Depending on that, you are going to classify your faults, right? So let's look at it. Normal fault. What happens in a normal fault? The upper block moves relative. It moves opposite direction to the lower block. In your reverse fault, right, your upper block, here look at this. This is your upper block, which is now moving up as relative to the lower block. Okay, and in a strike slip fault, you have, it's almost like a transform boundary, right? How you study a transform boundary? Exactly, a strike slip fault is created. Okay, so you might be asking, okay, we got faults. What are thrusts? Thrusts are nothing but faults which have a particular angle. Have a look at this. Thrusts are specific type of reverse fault with a low angle dip. So the same thing. Remember the transform thing that we just took a look at. So if this was on a planar basis, right, this assumes a lot acute angle here. Okay, less than 45 degrees from the horizontal. Simple. This is a thrust. So this is what you are observing in North and South Almoda, and it assumes a larger angle, that particular zone of subduction that is happening, and that is called as a fault. Okay, thrust faults accommodate compressional stress, obviously, because you're looking at compression that is causing all of the rocks, right, to go ahead and move over each other over that particular angle, right? It is all because of compressional force. Okay, so this is the difference between your fault and your thrust. Very, very important, very, very simple, and something that you ought to know of. Okay, have a fair idea, right? Okay, chalo, let's look at the question then. Okay, the Cascadia subduction zone is associated with what? Juan de Fuca and Nazca plates, Juan de Fuca and North American plates, Juan de Fuca and Cocos, or Juan de Fuca and African plate. Now, even if you do not know the answer to the Cascadian, even though I discussed it in the say class, okay, I'm sure you have a good idea of the plates, the major and the minor plates across the entire globe. All right. All I want you to identify is which one of these is a neighbor to Juan de Fuca. Forget the question even if you do not know the question. Okay. All you have to do is know your mapping of the major and minor plates, right? So if you think that Juan de Fuca and African are close by to each other, right, then go ahead and mark D, and at the same time go ahead and start revising your major and minor plates. I would highly recommend that. Okay. Right. So if you have any particular questions for me, you will go ahead and get in touch with me on my Instagram. Sandhya, I will be meeting on the 20th, like I told you, in the class. Okay. Right. Let's look at the questions of yesterday. So yesterday we discussed 3 types of consent, by the way. Okay. Informed consent, then we discussed required consent and presumed consent. Okay. Minor differences, but terms that are again closely related. Okay. So here, every person is supposed to be agreeing for an organ donation unless the person has decided not to go ahead and donate. In that case, it is required to be presumed content. Okay, you are presuming that the person has agreed. Okay, so your answer here is C. Look at this now. Which of the above may be considered to be predators of cheetal or spotted deer? So I had asked you. Now please understand, these kind of questions cannot be prepared. So I don't suggest you to get worried if you get this incorrect. More importantly, have an idea of the, say, predator-prey relationship between different species that might exist in the forest. Okay, and you find that unfortunately the cheetal or the spotted deer is little down in that food chain. Okay, so you find that crocodiles eat it, of course. you find baby spotted deers or even juvenile spotted deers can be consumed by pythons. Okay, eagles are known to prey on newly born cheetals. Okay, dholes, fishing cats, jackals, all of them eventually prey on the cheetal. So your D is the correct answer. Okay. Now, apartheid. So we discussed in detail again yesterday. Okay. So what did it mean, apartheid? Obviously, it was to do with segregation. It was to do with discrimination. But in which fields? The answer to this question is all of the above. Okay. You had discrimination in public facilities. You had all black and all white facilities. Okay. You had discrimination in social events that was largely a byproduct of this discrimination that existed in real life also outside the social events. Okay. You had segregation in housing. In fact, what you found is that certain areas were earmarked for all blacks. Okay, only black people would stay there, and this was known as Bantustans. Okay, and you obviously had employment opportunity. Only certain jobs were available for the blacks. The rest, everything was to be done by the whites. Okay, so all of the above is the correct answer. As well as Bantustans are nothing but your segregation through all black enclaves. Okay, so A being the answer here. Right, Shubham, Eldho, Monica, extrovert. By the way, guys, I must thank extrovert, Anjali, user. Guys, you have left me some really good messages, and as a teacher, I am genuinely humbled by the belief, the faith, the genuine respect that you guys have. Okay, my best wishes are with you, and if I can be of any use to you during your preparation, do consider reaching out to me and stay connected with this entire class that we do here. And once again, before I go forward, I must thank these individuals for just the good messages that they leave for me. You know, it brings a smile to the face of any educator, and I'm genuinely thankful to you. Okay, so Monica, extrovert, Akhil, Twinkle, Nirja, Sonu, Anjali, user, Vidisha, Pooja, Ulfat, Anurag. Ulfat, thanks for your comment. Mandeep, Satyabrata, Coder, Ayush, Aditya, Gatsu, and Vidit. Thank you so much for your feedback, guys. Thank you so much for your participation. Some of you might have got that Cheetal question incorrect. Don't get worried. Okay, now you know, right? And to the rest of you, I can only ask you to go ahead and answer the questions of today's class and leave an answer for me in the comment box. Okay, go ahead and access the PDF of this entire lecture from my Telegram channel. And I will see you tomorrow evening at the same time, 5 p.m. in the next class of Indian Express Explained. Okay, have a productive day, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, and study well. Bye.